I believe it's true of a certain personality type. We'll call them Class A personalities. I type A personalities. I don't mean that they're a better type of personality than any other. I just mean that if you've ever heard someone say, oh, he's a type A or she's a type A, it usually means a couple of things. Number one, it usually means they're quite outgoing. They have their own kind of way of moving into a room, and when they move into the room, they kind of take over the room. I have two daughters. Both of them are strikingly beautiful. Both of them kind of get attention anywhere that they go naturally anyway. My oldest daughter is a lot more mellow now than she was in her late teens and early 20s, but she's always been a talker. And when I say always been a talker, I mean when she was a kid, we used to think if she didn't talk with her mouth full, she would starve to death. I mean, she never stopped talking. And as she grew older, she would find that walking into a room where there was a conversation already going, she would literally step into an engaged conversation, into a triad of people. And so anyway, that was her introduction. And for a period of time, it was very effective because it didn't matter what you were talking about. So anyway meant I'm about to start talking and I'm probably not going to stop for a while, so you should just listen. She's mellowed out from that quite a bit, but I think the type A personality that says I'm outspoken, I'm outgoing, I'm not afraid of anybody, I'm not intimidated by anybody, I can make my own decisions, I can drive through this life, and if I have to do it alone, I'm okay with that, is a type of personality that allows a lot of people to kind of approach life with that same viewpoint. I have something to say. I have to say something. I have to get this off my chest. I have to be important. I have to be out there. Now there's a challenge with that type of personality, because that type of personality often, especially if it's the type that moves into a public arena, like public speaking, like teaching, like training, like political leadership, like religious leadership, that type of personality in a leadership role, sometimes the ego that follows that gets way out of control. And here's what I mean by that. There are a lot of people, whether they're running for political office or they're trying to persuade you to buy their product or follow their team or join their idea, they allow the number of people who agree with them, who follow them, who listen to what they're saying, to be evidence that what they're saying is right. I want you to listen to that again. I want you to listen really slowly. They allow the number of people who follow them or like them or become fans of theirs to be evidence that what they're saying is right. As you're letting that soak in for a moment, I want you to think of the number of people who use social media, just like I am right now, who are using it to persuade and to influence people, just like I am right now, who are using the success or failure of that presentation, post, speech, video, share, meme, whatever it is. They use the favorability or the popularity of that outgoing expression of themselves to determine whether or not what they said is right or valuable or important, or whether or not they are right or valuable or important. How do I know this? Because for a long time it was me. For a long time I needed the validation to know that what I said was important. I would say it, I would think through it in my own head before I'd say it. I'd rehearse it in my own head before I would think through it, before I would say it. I would research it before I would think through it, before I would say it in my own head, before I would rehearse it and then say it to the crowd. And so it wasn't like I was just making stuff up off the top of my head. And yet, the value of what I shared was often determined, in my own opinion, by how many people liked it or shared it or spread the word. I can't say I've completely gotten over that, because I still have this fascination the minute I hit stop on this live video to see how many people were watching while I was doing it. From a marketing standpoint, that's a good plan. It's absolutely essential, in fact, to know that if you're standing on the mountain and you're screaming something and no echo is coming back at you, no one resonates with what you're saying, you're either standing on the wrong mountain or you're screaming the wrong thing. That's just the reality of good communication. So if you're delivering a keynote speech or a graduation commencement speech or an opening keynote speech or a Bible study or a political sermon, and no one replies and no one responds, then you're either talking to the wrong crowd or you're saying the wrong thing to that crowd. From purely a marketing communication standpoint, that's extremely important to know. Where it's not important is if the message that's coming out of you is what's dripping out of you when you're squeezed. You've heard me say it time and time again. You can never, ever, 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 never squeeze a pineapple hard enough to get ketchup out of it because it's not in there. But if pressure is being put on you to express yourself, whether that's pressure from heaven and you feel like God's telling you you've got to say this, or it's pressure from people around you who are expecting you to express your vision for your business, your vision for your leadership, your vision for your church, whatever it is, that pressure that's being put on you is expecting you to express. When that expression comes, what you're not looking for is numbers, is volume, is approval, because the message has to get out there either way. And that's where we begin to divide a very fine line between I just have to say something and I truly have something to say. And I'm going to ask you to check yourself when you fall into that trap of saying, I just want to have a large number of people following me on Facebook. I just need to reach 10,000 fans. I just need to know that 1,000 people watch every time I turn on my Facebook live stream. I think what you'll find in a lot of those who have found success is that they're not striving for the numbers. They're expressing what they feel like they will explode if they don't express. And they're allowing that message to either resonate or fall flat, but the message to stand on its own. The result is, as that message does that, and Benjamin Watts, I believe is his name, is a gentleman who is an educated guy. He's a college graduate, went on to play football in the NFL. He's played and won on a Super Bowl championship team. He now plays for another NFL team. And so he does have a bit of a platform as far as being in front of the cameras and being a superstar athlete and being in the top 3% of all athletes on the planet. But his conversation about racism and racial divide in America was a powerful, powerful statement that he did not make to build his NFL career. He did not make that statement to build his notoriety. He did not make that statement to create a platform so that when he's done with the NFL, he has something to do. He made that statement because his heart wouldn't let him not make that statement. The result of him making his statements have been books and speaking engagements and millions of people on Facebook sharing that conversation over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. And so a lot of notoriety has been built from a statement that his heart simply wouldn't let him keep in. There's a big difference between being obedient and expressing the message that you feel like will explode within you if you don't let it out, and trying to craft enough of a message, a kind of a message, a type of a message, a particular message, a speech that sells in order to build notoriety and fame for yourself. And it's real easy to be trapped in that latter position. It's real easy to be trapped in the place where you're saying, I only want to do this so that I can get famous, so that I can sell books, so I can generate revenue, so I can get on speaking stages, so that... I know. I spent 5 years chasing that same notion. But the idea of being effective with the message that has been placed in your heart and the thing that drips out of you when you're squeezed, that notion has a mind of its own. It has an acknowledgement of its own. It has a reward of its own. It has a return on the investment of the research and the presentation and the preparation and the writing and the reading 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 to prepare so that the content that does come out of you when you're squeezed is solid, that it's well founded, that it's well crafted, that it's been done to the highest level, that it's world class. And yet, if what you're driven by is the reaction to the crowd and not the purpose for which you deliver the message, the crowd is fickle. They will love you today and hate you tomorrow. And if you allow that fickle crowd, whether you're talking Facebook or a public arena or a political arena or a church service, if you allow that crowd to dictate to you your worth, you're going to be in trouble. You're going to find yourself always wanting more crowd approval, always needing bigger stages, always desiring larger platforms, always pushing to have more exposure and more opportunity. If you're faithful to the message that's deep inside you, that message that comes out when you're squeezed, that something that you have to say that's dripping out of you because you have something to say. Not just I have to say something, but I have something to say. When the message in you is that powerful, it's that dripping, it will resonate with those for whom that message is sent. Now, how do I know that? Partially from my own experience, but also from this. Jesus looked out and saw that a large crowd had arrived. He said to Philip, "Where can we buy food to feed these?" You may know this story already, right? This is from John chapter 6. It's talking about the feeding of the 5,000. And this large crowd, some say that with the 5,000 referenced in Scripture was actually 5,000 men, so there were also women and children. So potentially a crowd as large as 15,000, maybe even 20,000 people gathered at the foot of the hills around this position where Jesus had set up to teach for the day. Now, I don't know that his intention was to teach 5,000 or 15,000 people. I believe he was going to teach, but had no idea how many people were going to come. Now, he's Jesus. Of course, he knew exactly how many. He could tell you by the name who was there, but that's not my point. My point was, Jesus said, "Make the people sit down." There was a nice carpet of grass in this place, and they sat down. About 5,000 of them were seated. And then he blessed the fish, and he blessed the bread, and he fed them. Okay, so this story is about feeding the 5,000. It's about giving them what they want. I want you to think about that for a minute. How many times, if you're a presenter, or if you're a teacher, if you're a business leader, if you're a salesperson, have you given them what they want in order to gather a large crowd? You don't give them what you're supposed to. You don't give them what you have to. You don't give them what drips out of you when you're squeezed. You give them what they want. In fact, if you listen to a lot of public speaking trainers, they'll tell you, give the crowd what they want. That's how you become famous. There is some truth to that. Jesus had 15,000 of them. It only took him 2 years to build a following of 15,000 without Twitter, without LinkedIn, without CNN, without Fox News, without celebrity press, without anybody to do public relations campaigns for him. In fact, in another passage, and we've talked about it before, one of the disciples came to him, one of his brothers, and said, "Hey, let me go into that town before you get there. I'll tell them you're coming. You'll have a larger crowd." He's like, "I don't need that. And I don't want that. That's not why I go. Those who the Lord will send to me, those will be ready to hear." As we go on in this passage, though, and I'm going to challenge you to read this because I don't want to take all the time that it will take to read all of it. But we go on in this passage, and we reach a place where not because of the words he was saying, not because of the message that he was delivering, not because of what he was teaching that day, the people realized God was at work among them and what Jesus had done. They said, "This is the prophet for sure, God's prophet right here in Galilee." Jesus saw that in their enthusiasm, they were about to grab him and make him king, so he slipped off and went back up into the mountain by himself. Jesus realized that his popularity was growing among a fickle crowd. Popularity among a fickle crowd can be a dangerous thing. You ever heard of mob mentality? People, they move with that sway, and then all of a sudden your ideas are no longer popular and they turn on you in an instant. The next day, the crowd was left behind. Now, there's a little paragraph there that I taught on January 26th. You can go back to the Tell It Like It Is episodes, and you'll find on January 26th of this year. I taught on the disciples. After Jesus vanished into the mountain, the disciples took off, got in a boat, and went across to the other side of the sea. Lake Tiberias, Sea of Galilee, same thing. They went across to the other side of the sea, and when the people from the teaching that had received the bread realized the disciples were gone and Jesus was gone, and they knew he didn't get in the boat with them, but he also still wasn't here, they were a little bit confused. The truth is, when the storm rose up in the middle of the night, Jesus walked 4 miles across the lake to get in the boat with his disciples, and then instantly they were on the other side. That whole video, again, January 26th, you can go back and see it. The next day, the crowd that was left behind realized there had only been one boat, and that Jesus had not gotten into the boat with his disciples. They had seen them go off without him, but now boats from Tiberias had pulled up near where they had eaten the bread that had been blessed by the master. So when the crowd realized he was gone and wasn't coming back, they piled into the Tiberias boats and headed for Capernaum looking for Jesus. So it wasn't enough to realize he was gone. It wasn't enough that they had been fed not only the teaching, the spiritual food, but they'd been fed the bread and the fish. Now they're looking for Jesus, going, feed us again. Feed us some more. So they get in the boats and they pursue him. Now he fled from them. He ran from them to hide in the mountains. And they realized he didn't get into that boat to go across the sea, but he didn't hear anymore, so he must be on the other side. When they found him back across the sea, they said, Rabbi, when did you get here? Jesus answered, you've come looking for me not because you saw God in my actions, but because I fed you, I filled your stomachs for free. All right. How many times have religious leaders, political leaders, I even see some missionaries that do it, they go into various places around the earth and they take with them gifts. It's almost like the gospel has to be bribery. Like the message isn't valid unless I give you a free pair of shoes first. Like the message isn't valid unless I give you free food. Like the message isn't valid unless I give you first. Now, I understand in the world of social economics, not financial exchange, but relational exchange, that sometimes to open up a relationship, to launch a relationship, you've got to have something to give first, because asking someone to take from you what they cannot see when they will not accept from you what they can see is a complicated thing. That's kind of what Jesus had going on here. He realized that if they're going to hear the message, I'm going to have to feed them, because I didn't want to send them all home. I don't have the money to go buy all the food it's going to take. Here's an opportunity both to show my disciples better who I am and to feed the crowd. And so that was what Jesus fed the 5,000 for. But the 5,000 who were fed, or 15,000, however you look at that number, that group of people who were fed didn't pursue Jesus for the message that was on his heart. They pursued him for more of the free stuff that he gave away. How often do we find ourselves in business or in preaching delivering a message that seems to go over better when it comes with all kinds of tchotchkes, but without a free book, without a free pen, without a free something, just getting them to have a conversation with you seems like an uphill climb. If you're paid to speak, and I've been there, they call you, they want you to make the trip to them. They don't want to pay all the expenses. They want to pay less money because they know that eventually they can negotiate somebody down to get that keynote fee right into their budget. And they have a limited budget, and they have a limited expression, and they have a small group, but they want you to come to speak to their small group for free, expecting you'll sell a lot of books in the background. And you're thinking, how am I going to sell books when you're asking me to do everything else for free? Doesn't that tell me the crowd already, like Jesus's crowd, expects to get a bunch for free? Which means I'm basically working for free. And if you're okay with that, if the burden of the message on your heart is so important that you'll take it anywhere, even at your own expense, not just not getting paid to be there and speak, but you're paying out of your pocket to be there and speak. I know some people who deliver messages in high schools, and it costs them to rent sound systems and to pay people to set up sound systems and bring in video screens and projectors or the big LED boards. And it costs them for the stuff that they give away to the crowd. And it costs them to take time off work. And it costs them. And it costs them. They pay money out of pocket to have the opportunity to speak to large crowds of high school students. Many churches send people on mission trips, and these people pay individually out of their own pocket to go on this mission trip, to be able to be sent abroad because the message on their heart is so important. I honor you, I laud you if you are the type of person whose message is so burning within you that you're willing to shell out money yourself to buy the right to speak to a crowd. But if you're doing that because your evidence of your value rests in the size and the applause of the crowd, stop that. It's going to not only cost you a lot of money, but in the end, it's going to cost you a lot of heart and a lot of faith in humanity and a lot of faith in yourself. If, on the other hand, the message that you're delivering is what's burning within you because you don't have a choice but to be obedient to that message and deliver it everywhere you have the opportunity, then carry on, because your reward isn't here. It's not in book sales. It's not in t-shirt sales. It's not in merchandise. It's not in platform speaking paychecks. Your reward is hidden somewhere else, and it's being stored up with an exponential return on it that will look so much bigger when that paycheck is delivered. There will never be a keynote speech. There will never be a presentation. There will never be an award that could be won, a limo ride, a plane ride, an audience that you could speak in front of any size that will match the reward of "that's my good and faithful servant." I'm telling you, nothing will match that. Jesus carries on. He says, don't waste your energy striving for perishable food like that, like the 5,000 followers or the 10,000 followers or the 100,000 followers. I believe last I heard Vin Diesel's like number 3 in all followers with over 1 million followers on Facebook. And that doesn't include his Instagram account and his Twitter account and blah, blah, blah. And the role that he played in Fate 8 is a new dynamic for him. And I think it's only going to cause those numbers to grow. Don't waste your energy striving for perishable food like that. Work for the food that sticks with you, food that nourishes your lasting life, food the Son of Man provides. He and what he does are guaranteed by the Father to last. Now, here's where we run into a real challenge, because the immediate reply of the crowds who have surrounded him, who have followed him from one place to another to continue to get from him for free both the teaching and the miracles. They've seen people healed. They've seen the sick healed. They've seen the dead raised. John chapter 5, there was a young boy whose parents thought he was going to be dead before they got home. And dad said, will you please come to my son? And Jesus said, your faith has made him whole. And before the man got home, his servants came and said, at about the same time that happened, bam, he's alive again. He's good to go. Jesus was performing miracles. He was feeding large crowds. He was teaching in places all over the world, or all over his area. And yet they pursued him for the free things that he gave away. And then he turns it on them and he says, they said, well, what do we do then to get in on God's works? How many times, and I know John Maxwell has said this, how many times have you, as a presenter, as a teacher, as a leader, as a speaker who has spent years developing your craft, years researching your content, years studying the material, hours upon hours preparing for a single 20-minute presentation, and then you have somebody walk up to you after that presentation and go, I want to do what you do. But because they see a 20-minute presentation of it, they have no idea the heartache, the passion, the late hours, the long studies, the redirects, the rabbit trails that you go down studying a topic and then realize, wow, that guy was a nut. I need to get back to the corner. I need to start over again. I've got to get back to a foundational place and work out from there. I've got to be able to cover all the spread of this topic, but That person I've been listening to for a while is kind of twisted. I need to get some more insights on that. They don't see that. They see 20 minutes on the stage in front of a crowd. They see one book that's published and it's become a bestseller. They see that success. And they ask the same question. How do I do what you do? They said to Jesus, well, what do we do then to get in on God's works? How can we be doing what you're doing? I mean, you got this everlasting food, apparently. You got this message that draws large crowds. How do we get some of that? Jesus said, throw your lot in with the one that God has sent. That kind of commitment gets you in on God's works. They waffled. This is the Message translation, so he uses some colorful expressions of today's language to explain the content that was going on then. I believe Dr. Eugene Peterson is not only a good theologian, but he's well-rounded in the way he presents in the message, the conversation that was happening in different languages. Jesus says, throw in your lot with the one that God has sent. That kind of commitment gets you in on God's works. They waffled. Why don't you give us a clue about who you are? Just a hint of what's going on. When we see what's up, we'll commit ourselves. Show us what you can do. I mean, Moses fed our ancestors with bread in the desert. It says so in the scripture. He gave them bread from heaven to eat. Jesus responded, the real significance of that scripture is not that Moses gave you bread from heaven, but that my Father is right now offering you bread from heaven. The real bread, the bread of God, came down out of heaven, and it is giving life to the world. They jumped at that. Master, give us this bread. Give it to us now and forever. Now, you got to remember that their conception was the days of Moses and manna, that every day the children of Israel woke up, there was manna covering the ground. They didn't have to harvest it. They didn't have to do anything more than harvest it. They didn't have to plant it. They didn't have to reap it. They didn't have to take care of it. They didn't have to do anything. Just bread showed up daily. The daily sustenance of God appeared for them with no effort on their part, except to gather what their household could eat. That's all they had to do. You want it? Go get what you can eat. That's it. That's the depth of the complication. And it lasted until God said it wasn't going to last anymore. They became in the habit of all they had to get up and go get it. Get up and go get it. You're hungry, get up and go get it. It's like staying in a hotel that has breakfast every morning. All you got to do is get up and go get it. It's already there. It's already cooked. You don't even have to do the dishes when you're done. And so when they said to him, give us this bread now and forever, they thought what Jesus was going to reply with was manna from heaven. Give us a perpetual source of free stuff. Give us more free stuff. I hate to say it, but I venture to say that there are many churches today with the free coffee and the free donuts in the lobby and blah, 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 who have great, large gatherings of churchy people that if they cut off the donut supply or cut off the coffee supply, wouldn't be there. Because the message isn't resonating. The transformation of life isn't happening. The bread of life isn't being expressed in them and to them and through them. They really have more of the donut of life. It has a big hole in the middle, and it's not very nutritious. The bread of life, on the other hand, is a whole different thing. Jesus goes on to say, I am the bread of life. Now that statement all on its own is paradoxical because he says, I am that I am. I am the bread of life. I'm not manna from heaven. I'm not giving you manna from heaven. I am manna from heaven. I am sent down by God to become your eternal sustenance. And then he makes the fatal presenter's mistake. He makes the fatal presenter's mistake. The presenter, the teacher, the public speaker, the preacher that wants to build a crowd of following, that wants to build notoriety, that wants to have 10,000 followers on Facebook, etc., 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 has one primary assignment. Know your crowd. Know their history, know their culture, know their nature, know what's important to them, know what they care about, know what language they speak, and then stay within that octopus. Because if you get outside of their culture, their language, their habits, you get outside of that, you're going to lose them. And like I said when I started, there's nothing more risky than a fickle crowd, and the crowd is always fickle. You cannot get the evidence of your value, of your truth, of your rightness from the reaction of the crowd. If that's what you base it on, then the evidence of your value will only rest in that crowd. And when that crowd is gone, you will believe your value is gone. Jesus is speaking to Israelites who've been studying the law of Moses all their life. And the law of Moses told them, don't eat people and don't drink blood. Jesus goes on from right here to say, so if you're going to have part in this work God's doing, if that's what you really, really want, then the only way to really have communion with me is, well, to have communion with me, to eat my flesh, to drink my blood, because I am the bread of life. You've got to be consumed of me. You've got to be consumed with me. And if I am all-consuming to you, then you will have part in me. You've got to believe in me. You've got to be sold out. And the children of Israel and the religious leaders of the day went, whoa, hold up, wait a minute, back the train up. I ain't about to start eating flesh. I ain't about to start drinking blood. I ain't about to be all consumed with this I am bread of life stuff. And many of them fell away. To the extent that Jesus even had to talk to the 12 people in his inner circle. How many of you have an inner circle of 12? Had to talk to the people in his inner circle and go, all right, so that crowd of 15,000 that we had yesterday, I mean, we had 15,000 Facebook followers, but like a bad tweet, like dragging somebody off the airplane, United Airlines, like making a huge mistake of racial indifference. That one statement cost us all of our followers. Oops. Well, except that he's God and he gets his validation in chapter 3 and 4. He says, the only testimonies I'm concerned about are the fact that you're not even paying attention to the fact that all the prophets of old mentioned me. Everyone that you study in the law talks about me. My Father in heaven talks about me. The miracles and the signs that I perform, they talk about me. There is a witness that I believe, and it's my Father. And the rest of you, I love you, but I'm not basing my value on you. And so I'm sure his disciples went, yikes, what he just said turned away 15,000 people. Your Facebook page just went from blasting to zero, crickets, silence. No one cares because of that one thing you said. That one phrase that came out of your mouth turned the entire audience off. They're done with you. And Jesus said, what about you? My inner circle. The 12 of you that have known me since I started my ministry. The ones who follow me no matter what. The ones who've been with me through thick and thin. The ones who will be here when I'm leaving. What about you? Do you also want to leave? And Peter said, to whom would we turn? I mean, you're talking truth. You're the one that has the words of eternal life. Who else would we follow to get what you've given us? And they weren't talking about the free stuff. They were talking about the knowledge and the understanding of heaven content. 15,000 walked away. Social media dried up. Speaking engagements dried up. Opportunities to be in front of large crowds dried up. And Jesus said, that's okay. I am faithful to my message. I'm faithful to my Father, and I don't care. The 15,000 versus 45,000 versus 100,000 doesn't mean anything to me. Go back to John chapter 3 and 4 when John the Baptist was baptizing and Jesus came along. It was the scribes and the Pharisees. It was the religious leaders of the day, along with some of John's disciples who came to John and they went, look, dude, Jesus is winning. He's making more disciples. He's baptizing more people. You are behind in this numbers game. And John said, and so it should be, that I would become less so that he can become more. John knew his role. John knew his message. John wasn't going to stop speaking his message until he was dead. And he did. Lost his head. Went to jail. Because he wouldn't shut up talking about Jesus. Jesus said, I'm going to keep talking about my Father if it costs me my life. And he knew that it would. But he wasn't concerned about the 5,000. So I want to challenge you, whether you're speaking the gospel, whether you're preaching the gospel, or you're just talking about leadership alone, or you're talking about other things that would be worth public notoriety, don't let the famous trap catch you. Don't let the popular trap catch you. Because those large crowds, they're fickle, and they'll turn on you like a dime. In fact, they'll turn on you like a snake. You don't believe me? Just go back over the last year and see how many celebrities have lost their speaking engagements, their job opportunities, lost their careers in media, in journalism, in sports broadcasting. Some of them in roles that you would think no one even knows who this yo-yo is. But one slip of the tongue, one phrase that was untoward, one thing they said that was unkind, that really just got under the skin of the wrong people, and it cost them everything. The notoriety, the famous, the popular that comes along with building a large crowd just means you're higher on the target list. You are more on the radar than anybody else. And crowds that are fickle will turn on you like a snake, and they'll take you down. If you get your validity for your message, for your own self-worth, for your own personal value from the size of the crowd that follows you or doesn't, you're in trouble. Because when, not if, but when the crowd turns on you and you go down in flames, it's going to be hard and it's going to be ugly. If the message of your life is a message that God has placed in your heart and you can't not share it, be loyal to the message and not to your fans. And you'll find that the Father in heaven has got your back. Don't fall into the trap of famous. I'm J. Loren Norris, and you've been watching Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day.